Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, written by himself. And then this one is by me, Travis Weber. And there's a picture of him here because he was potentially the most photographed man of the 1800s. I don't think anyone knows for sure, but there's definitely a lot of pictures of him. So yeah, this book is a little bit above my pay grade. To be honest, I started up this YouTube channel just to help myself learn about the books by just recounting them and summarizing them. But this is a pretty serious book. Definitely a good review on this would know a lot more about the historical context, just know a lot more in general, but I'm going to do my best. This is essentially just what I got from the book, not actually a good book review, so keep that in mind. So context from the book. So it was published in 1845. He was only 28 at the time of publishing, or thereabouts. He doesn't actually know exactly when he was born, which is pretty common for slaves. They didn't always know their birth year, let alone their birthday. Yeah, that's a thing. At the time of writing this book, slavery was still 20 years from being nationally illegal. Illegal everywhere. 20 years were still to go before the federal government was like, all right, cut it out, cut off slavery. He was in Maryland for most of this book, if I am correct. And so you can see it's kind of near the border of free states versus slave states. And supposedly it was actually better, according to him. He had it better than a lot of other slaves on some of the plantations in the deeper south. That's just according to him. I don't know if that's true or not. So important events. These aren't all the important events because I don't want to spoil too much. And there's obviously a lot of stuff that happened throughout his life, but hopefully this can just pique your interest in the book a little bit. At around a year or less old, he was separated from his mother. And this was actually common for a lot of slaves. If a slave gave birth to a kid, they'd usually separate them pretty young. And he was raised by his grandmother and aunt and a couple other women. His mother moved away to a plantation 12 miles away. Well, not moved away. She was moved, forcefully. Obviously, she wanted to stay with her kid. He only ended up seeing her a few times before she died when he was at the age of 10, which he said he met with the same feelings as he would the death of a stranger. That's because he just really didn't know her. Which is pretty tragic, not knowing your mom. At the age of 7, he was sent to live with a new master in Baltimore, so in the city, not working on a plantation. The new master was the brother of his master's son-in-law. He didn't actually really change ownership, I don't think. He just got sent to live with the new master. During this time, he was put under the use of his new master's wife, who had never owned a slave, and she started teaching him the ABCs, and only just a little bit of it. Because then her husband came in and said, if you give a slave an inch, he will take an L. And Frederick Douglass did take an L. Not sure what an L is, but he took a lot more. He took just the very beginning seedlings of learning to read, and he fostered that. Mainly from learning from other kids. He would get other kids in the neighborhood who were around his same age, like white kids, and he'd get them to teach him how to read some more. So part of the reason why he wanted to read so bad, not all of it, but just part of it, was because he saw his master almost afraid of him learning how to read. So he knew that because of that, somehow reading has to be something, if it's something that his master's fearful of, then it's something good. So that encouraged him. Another thing they learned from this is the damage done not only to the slave, but also the slave master. That's because his woman he was working for, she was good at first. She was very kind, very nice to him, started teaching him, the alphabet and how to read and write. But over time, through the time of owning a slave, she became more and more, evil or dark or just not a nice person. Yeah, that's why there's damage done also to the slave master, because it's not good for the spirit to be in charge of another human being. It corrupts the soul. He got to see firsthand how even someone who starts out, being nice and being kind to a slave, just if you're in charge of a slave, there's definitely a tendency to become mean and take advantage of that. At age 15, he was sent back to work on a plantation, but by this time he knew how to read a little bit. He was from the city, so where he wasn't used to a hard lifestyle, and so he was kind of nah. He wasn't as submissive as they liked. He got sent to a slave breaking master at age 15 or 16, And this guy was tough, like really tough. And so, but 6 months in, he finally fights him. The guy's name is Covey. And he fought Covey and his friend. And he said the fight lasted nearly 2 hours. Yet this was kind of a turning point in his life because, I mean, he fought back. Yeah, you'd have to read about it. You can look up just this section of the book if you want. It's a pretty good section to just read. I read it even before I actually read the book. It's pretty good writing. But yeah. And so, yeah, this is a turning point. And so he says in here, he says, however long I might remain a slave in form, the day had passed forever when I could be a slave in fact. He says, the white man who expected to succeed in whipping must also succeed in killing me. So yeah, total turning point. Almost, you can consider it the climax of the book where he pretty much decides, like, fuck this. I'm not a slave, bro. I'm way better than this. Part of that's because he knew how to read. Part of that's just, I don't know. He just knew it. But yeah, at age 21, he escaped slavery, story not outlined. And he didn't outline the story because slavery was still legal. So he didn't want to hurt the chances of other people to escape. In later books, then I'm pretty sure he does end up outlining his escape and talking about it. I've heard he stole a ship, but I don't really know because I haven't read his other books. But yeah. And he married his wife, who was a free black woman, within a few days of reaching New Bedford, which was where he ended up settling down. And from where I believe he wrote the book from there. All right, one more thing is, so just because he decided he shouldn't be a slave hardly means that it was guaranteed that he was going to escape. He got very lucky in a lot of ways. If you read the book, he has at least one failed escape attempt, but yeah, it definitely puts into perspective why more people didn't escape. They were, all the laws and everything were set up for them to not be able to escape. So, they were, totally boned. Yeah, it's not just I want to escape. Ooh, let me hop a fence. It's not like just ditching school. They were, entrenched. Totally could just be, totally killed for trying to escape. And there is a lot of slaves that died. That's why you should read the book, because there's a lot of stuff that happens that I'm skipping over. A lot of hardship, a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of above my pay grade to describe. So just read the book. Recommendation, 10 out of 10. 3 big reasons why. 1, powerhouse writing style. Dude just says it exactly how it is. It's like this is how I would imagine a professional boxer would write. States it how it is. Really good at putting you in there. If you don't believe me, the reviews at the time didn't believe that a slave had written the book because it was written so well. He wrote a bunch of other stuff too, so yeah, he definitely did write. Number 2 reason to read this book is it's American history. There's a lot of stuff that is in this book that's just totally crazy. Yeah, I'd say that's good enough reason to read it right there. Number 3 is it's a perspective that you can get very few other places. If you want to have even just a slight idea of what it's like to be a slave or to be living in a slave society, read this book for sure. Yeah. If there's any other books written about being a slave, I doubt any of them can put you in the shoes as well as this one. Takeaways from this book. So first and foremost is gratitude. So I'm grateful that, first of all, I got to know my parents, that I have never been without a warm bed, never went to bed actually hungry, maybe a little bit hungry, but never starving. Obviously, that makes me pretty grateful for everything I had, including even just a warm bed. He literally describes having slept in a sack for most of his childhood on freezing cold nights. Cool. Number 2 is the importance of reading, the power of learning. And the reason why this is because Frederick didn't have this when he discovered the power of being well learned, well read, all the opportunity that learning opens up to you. Well, he discovered that for himself firsthand, and so he has an added appreciation of what it means to be literate, what it means to be learned, that probably I'll never have, and most of us will probably never have the same appreciation that he does, but having read his perspective on it definitely adds to my appreciation. Number 3 is political takeaways, and this one's tough because obviously it's not super applicable to modern day. Obviously, if there was a vote on slavery, I'd be abolitionist, no slavery, but there's still some lessons that we can take away. And so first and foremost is that the federal government stepped in and dissolved slavery in the United States and that was a good action. That may sound trivial, but that does impact my political beliefs, because it kind of shows that the federal government can be used for good. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed to be used for good, right? Like, we should still have extreme caution in pushing our issues to be solved by the federal government. But there may be some issues that can be solved federally, and it can do a good thing. And yeah, dissolving slavery is one example of the federal government doing a good thing. Number 2 is the importance of a liberal democracy. Democracy hardly guarantees freedoms for all people. Obviously, you can have tyranny of the majority just as easily under democracy as you can have tyranny under any other system. And you can see that clearly outlined here, where you have democratic systems, but they're all working against a certain group of people, a certain minority of the population. And so it's important for us to be tolerant of all groups of people. And then that leads into my third point, which is that, what is freedom? So what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to not be free? And it's kind of a revolving definition. I'm still working on it. If I waited until I had a concrete definition in my own head of what is freedom, then this book presentation would never get out. So this is my half-baked definition of freedom. It's pretty much almost a measure of power, and in large part it's how much you're able to look after your own safety. So you can say under democracy, then people are free because now they have it under their own authority to look after their own safety through the government that they uphold and that they control through their voting. So you say, through democracy, people are free because they look after their own freedom and safety. But with slavery, you can see how a majority can be looking out for their own safety, but a minority can still get squashed underfoot. And so for that reason, the Second Amendment was originally at least partially designed to protect political minorities. But having read this book, I see the importance of the Second Amendment and civilian ownership of firearms, not only to protect the liberties of political minorities, but also ethnic minorities, any minority group. It's important for people to look after their own safety, even when the government won't. I think that's a very important component of freedom. And this book gave me an added appreciation of that. One more lesson that I just remembered is also just the loss of potential. He was very lucky to escape. A lot of people died trying to escape. He was encouraged to read and write and better his mind, speak out politically, because he thought it would help other slaves. Not only did he write this book, which is an amazing testament, it will forever stand in history, but he also lived a lot after this and did a number of things. I believe he started a newspaper. Just that he pursued his interests, pursued knowledge, pursued writing, and it was a very beneficial thing. And that there's a lot of people who were born slaves and could have done a lot of great things like Frederick Douglass did, but they never were able to because they lived their entire lives as slaves or were killed trying to escape. But yeah. Anyways, it was a great book still, so thanks for watching. Peace out.